First of all, let's start with how the draft unfolded. For several weeks, I have said to you the Raiders would not take Jalen Carter at number 7. There was a lot of noise that they would. They were not going to take number 7. A lot of that noise was generated through the Raiders, obviously trying to generate interest in their pick, but we told you they weren't going to take him. He was not on their board at number 7. We also had told you they had no intention of taking an offensive lineman. Now, I was a little shocked because earlier on Thursday, and it actually started Wednesday afternoon, all of a sudden people were emailing me, why are they taking an offensive lineman? What are they thinking taking an offensive lineman? And they had no intention of taking an offensive lineman. That was not the plan. Now, I had mentioned to you, ideally, they wanted to trade. Now, the Raiders could have made trades before the draft to move out of 7. But the problem is they didn't know how the board was going to fall. And so their price was very exorbitant, which is what it should have been. And they told teams, hey, this is what it's going to cost you if you want it now, but come back later and it may be a little bit different, which was very smart of Dave Ziegler. Now, Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, and I know a lot of people are angry with them. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But they're very disciplined men. They're very men who understand the game of football, both on the field and in management suites, is one with discipline. So they're very disciplined. And they knew, let's just wait and see how the board falls. Now, I've been writing for weeks, well, for years actually, but for weeks, that in the NFL, there's a term called a dude. These are the guys that you just know they're ready to play right now. These are guys that you can pick them and there's no concerns. Now, let's be honest. I do not expect the Raiders to be picking this high on a regular basis. I believe that Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels are going to have the Raiders in a much more competitive position than where they were this year. So when you do pick this high, you got to make sure you get a dude. You can't waste draft picks. And there can't be Damon Arnett's and other epic failures that the Raiders have in their past. Now, having said that, so the Raiders waited and let the board come to them. There were 2 players in this draft that were universally considered among all my NFL sources as dudes, guys that were just, hey, they're solid. Excuse me, take a drink of water. They're solid picks. And that was Will Henderson and Tyree Wilson. I've talked about that ad nauseum. So Will Anderson went and should have. And I just want you to know, if it had been Hondo Carpenter making the pick, I would have picked Will Anderson ahead of Tyree Wilson, but I would have been thrilled to pick Tyree Wilson. So either one would have been fine. But as the board began to fall, there were some people that made some picks that just didn't make sense. I'm going to be very blunt with you. This was one of the most fascinating NFL drafts that I've ever covered, and I've covered a ton of them because there were so many bad picks. And when I say by bad picks, we don't know if a player is going to turn out to be great. Let's use Max Crosby for an example. If the Raiders would have really believed in him and picked him first overall, they would have been trashed as a bad pick. But you look at where he is today and you would have said, wow, they were geniuses. But when I say bad picks, is these are guys that people could have got later in the draft that would have been available and they didn't. And so they overpaid. That's what I mean. I mean, any young man that makes it to the league at this level, you're ignorant if you call them trash or whatever. But they're bad picks in that sense. I hope that makes sense to you. So let me go a little bit deeper. As the draft board began to unfold, they begin to say to themselves, wait a minute now, we may have a shot here. And as calls came in for that trade, their price was very high. And even though some teams made some really good offers, there was not one offer that they valued higher than a Tyree Wilson. So let me even take you a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, inside a mindset of a Dave Ziegler. So let's just use a numbering system, and let's say that they think Tyree Wilson is a 95. I'm just only using this as an example. Well, if you're going to trade with me, you better give me 100 because I already know I'm going to get a 95 with my guy. And so even though people were willing to pay a very high price for that pick, even There was nobody willing to offer them more than what they thought the value at Tyree Wilson is. So he was there and they nabbed him. And let me tell you right now, I'll take all the criticism you want. I'm not a paid employee of the Raiders, although they did feed me tonight tomahawk steak and king crab legs. Thank you, Mark Davis. But I'm not a paid employee of the fan, and I don't lose my credentials if I'm critical. These are professionals. They don't care. As long as you're fair and don't make it personal, they don't care. But what they did is that's an A pick.